That one, yeah. I printed one down, yeah.
The extras right here. Some of those are pointed.
Thank you.
Oh, this isn't the corrected.
I'm sorry.
It's all right.
It is the one the website has.
It's all right.
I emailed
It's all right.
that.
We'll use this and we're gonna review what's on the correct agenda, okay? All right, so item number 1 is correct, item number 2 is correct, item number 3 is correct, item number 4 is correct, item number 5 is correct. Item number 6 is consideration of an IB diploma candidate new to the district. This was posted. Item number 7 is an update on the out-of-zone enrollment criteria that we submitted to the district last month. And then item number 6 becomes item number 8, and item number 7 becomes item number 9. So with that review, can I have a motion to approve the agenda for
I'm
today?
ready to approve the agenda.
So there's a second? Second. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? And then our next item is approval of both the December 10th and the December 19th meetings, which we'll post into the Dropbox for everybody's review. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any comment or discussion on the minutes? Okay, all in favor, say aye. All right, the next item is a change of the February meeting date. We made an attempt to do this through a little doodle poll. We didn't have 100% participation, and we also didn't really have a good date. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I'm hoping we can land on an alternative. The date that we had was the 11th at 4 o'clock. And as I understand it, that is too late for us to submit any of these requests for seed funds.
Correct, we're due by the 10th.
So we need a meeting date the week prior. Dr. Shaw, I think part of the issue was your schedule. Can you just tell us if there's a morning or an afternoon the week prior that works for you?
The week of the 3rd?
Correct.
Yeah, that's kind of the problem. I don't have a morning.
Okay, do you have an afternoon?
I do.
And when would that be?
I have Thursday afternoon and Friday afternoon.
All right, so what's Friday afternoons, I know are nobody's favorite.
No, they're not, and I have the afternoon
We'll be at
before,
FESCon.
which is Tuesday.
So you're,
We'll be at FESCon.
okay, so
Oh.
you're out,
I
so,
have Tuesday the afternoon at 4.
and I can't make that, so somebody would need to stand in for me. Who can make the 6th? Let's just do a show of hands. Thursday the 6th, who can make that?
For the afternoon.
Afternoon, we're only looking at afternoons.
4 until 6.
4 until 5:30.
4
You can? All right, and then who can make the 4th?
You can do the 6th.
Yeah, I think the 6th looks better. So I'm just gonna, can I entertain a motion to move the February meeting to Thursday the 6th from 4 to 5:30?
I so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right,
4:30 to 6.
4 to 5:30 is
4 to
what we
5.
usually do, right?
Yes, ma'am.
It's seamless. All right, and we know that we will not have our students. We'll get that updated right after the meeting. All right, the next item then are modifications for the bell schedule for 2014-15, Dr. Shaw.
I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Black.
Morning, everyone. I'll be pretty brief because this information has been out for a long time and you've probably already had a chance to see it. So I'll sort of try to do an abbreviated version. What I want to share with you, you two may have already seen this. What I want to share with you just real quickly is the four options that we are considering for the master schedule, a few of the pros and cons about them, and then I'll share with you some of the feedback that we received on the survey that really is about this information, because the survey has already been out. I don't know if any of you had a chance to take it. Quick review, you all know this, I believe, but we've done a lot of work leading up to the couple of options that we have on the table. I think many of you did the survey in the beginning of the year, but it asked all kinds of questions. Mostly, I kind of categorized the questions in three areas. We asked questions about student support, so like when do you want your students, or when do your students want to be able to get help from teachers? Before school, after school? Do they want time during the school day? There were lots of questions about those kinds of things. Design of the day questions, so there were questions like, in an ideal world, how long would you like a math class to be versus how long would you like a science class to be, and so on and so forth. Lots of questions about those kinds of things. And then there were just questions about flexibility, trying to feel out how flexible people might allow us to get. So for example, we asked about a virtual lab. Would you or your student be interested in taking a course, no matter the name of it, through a virtual lab, during the school day? Questions like that, and there were a lot of them. So there were three general kinds. So we did that. That was back in September. In October and November, we had a really good team of people do a lot of hard work, which was looking at about 17 different option schedules. However, I'll tell you that of the 17, there were really only a few. 17 maybe was a variation on 6 or 7 different schedules. It wasn't 17 distinct different ones. Do you know what I mean? So anyway, the scheduling team, we said they weren't a deciding body, obviously, but they had a very strong position on which of the 4 option schedules they wanted, and that was the 6-period traditional, what I call the traditional schedule. But we committed to bringing several options to the table that I'm going to share with you, and so we did add in others that we tried to find merit in, and certainly talked about the cons of. So before I show you these sample schedules, I want to be really clear in saying whatever you see up there for the lunch periods is not a decision. It's just a way that I made it so that you can look at it, but it doesn't mean that lunch has been decided in the way that you see it. And I think also the other thing that you'll see up here is you'll see a study hall in each schedule, and that is certainly not decided either. But what I would say is, we're reserving, of course, the right to say, in whatever schedule we choose, we may choose to do something like a study hall or a remediation period or something like that, or we may choose not to. So don't get too attached, in other words, what I'm saying, to the small details. We're just looking at big picture, and we don't need to nitpick, ooh, I don't like that lunch, or ooh, I don't like that, just for visual purposes. Okay. So here was the traditional schedule, and if you want to kind of follow along to some comparable details, all the stuff on the right is going to be the same on each schedule slide. So I tried to give some things that you can just compare. I call it traditional because a lot of schools run a 6-period day. Teachers teach 5 classes, kids take 6. So that would be a reduction in what we currently offer. Our kids currently take 7 classes and our teachers teach 6. So everyone would have 1 fewer. I think it's an important consideration, the amount of time that your child would spend in any given course, not even just in a day, but in the course of a school year. So 56 minutes over 180 days. I think this one has, I can't really remember now, almost the most seat time, maybe it is the most. Planning time for a teacher in a day would be 86 minutes. It meets every day. Staffing-wise, we would need about 2 more teachers to make it work. So that's a visual for you. Here are some of the pros and cons that the scheduling team talked about. Pros were it's going to reduce the academic load on students. We thought that was good for struggling students, maybe for everyone all around. Increased instructional time over what we have now. I'll let you skim it. I'm not going to go through it all. Cons were in the areas of there's not any built-in time for struggling students, and what we meant by that is right now if a student fails a course, there's plenty of time in his or her school day over the course of 4 years to make it back up. And that's an important consideration. Other cons were definitely in the areas of just choice. There would certainly be reduced choices and offerings in basically any of the extra areas is what I would tell you. So visual performing arts, career tech, health and PE, world language, and even in social studies or other areas, other core content areas where we tend to offer a lot of electives. Social studies is an area where we offer a lot of electives. You would see reduced offerings in those areas. You would see a different structure to IB, but it wouldn't eliminate the program. We would need to probably look at IB from the standpoint of saying, if you want to be an IB student, you can participate in one of two, or who knows what the number is, but one of 2 or 3 tracks. And so you would know from the beginning what you're taking for the next 2 years. There would really be little choice in there about, I want to go this direction or that. And some of the offerings would be reduced. You know, we might not have a lot of the art classes or something like that. Another schedule that we considered is a trimester schedule. So what that would mean is instead of there being 2 semesters in the school year, there would be 3. Right now a semester is, 90 days. I mean, if we go to school 180 days, then there are 2 90-day semesters. So in a trimester, there would be 3 60-day semesters. Things over on the right-hand side, it would be a little bit more course time, you know, by class. There's 72 minutes or so instead of 50 or 49 like we have now. The seat time, though, is less than a 6-period day. When you calculate it out over the course of how long a student will be in the class, it's only 8,600 minutes. Teacher planning time in a day would be over 102 minutes. It's an hour and a half plus, so they would teach 4 classes out of the 5. It would not reduce the choices for kids because, you know, over the course of several years, I think they can get 30 credits here. And we would need a few more teachers to staff it. It's probably doable. So pros and cons, many of the same, but I'll just highlight a couple. It wouldn't mean reduced offerings, so career tech, visual performing arts, all of those areas, magnet, IB, there wouldn't be any reductions there. It'd still reduce the academic load on students in sort of a chunk of time, but not throughout the course of a whole school year. It would reduce the load on teachers in a chunk of time, but not throughout the course of the whole school year. Cons are definitely in the area of kind of what would we do with this? You know, we would be the only school in Fulton County who would be proposing to do a trimester schedule. So it's a consideration, but in all honesty, if it is a strong consideration from, you know, folks saying we want to explore this and we like it, it would probably be something that we would, it would be something that we would implement in 15, 16. Because there are a lot of things that we would have to do. I mean, you can just imagine that there are a lot of people downtown who would have to do a lot of things behind computer screens to even get the system to function in a way to do 3 semesters instead of 2. Third one, and then the last one is really just our own, so I'm almost done. Third one is an A-day, B-day schedule, but it's 8 periods. So if you can see on the left, what would happen is on an A-day, there would be 4 classes. We would have 1st through 4th period, and then on a B-day, you would have 5th through 8th period. There are 90-minute classes. It's actually the least amount of time over the course of a school year in the class. So 8,100 minutes for a child versus 8,600 on a trimester versus 10,000 in the traditional schedule. So that's a consideration. Even though it seems like more time because they're 90-minute classes, it's actually the least amount of instructional time over the course of a year. More choices would definitely be available because kids would go from taking 7 classes now to 8. Teachers would go from teaching 6 classes now to 7. And that's really going to be one of the rubs with this schedule is It's not going to have really any kind of faculty support because it would mean an increase for most of the faculty, and what a lot of the faculty is hoping for, if anything, is a decrease. So I already gave you some of the pros and cons, really, and I'll let you look over this later if you'd like, so that I don't blather on. And then the last one is some variation of our current schedule, just to sort of expand your horizons a little bit. You know, I'll use our current schedule to talk about how we could really take any one of these, like we could take a 6-period day as well, and we could decide that a couple days a week that we would like to block classes. So we could take our current schedule and say on Wednesday have periods 1 through 4 and block them and make them longer so kids have more time in classes and teachers can do quote unquote cooler things. And then on Thursday have periods 5 through 8, and then therein lies the problem with our current schedule, is that it's got to be an even number to block them. But so it's just an illustration to say with any one of these schedules we can still do kind of innovative and neat things. So don't be limited just by what you see here, you know, think about some of the options. Anyway, I'm not going to do the pros and cons for our current schedule because we're living it, so you can understand the pros and cons. If you want to go back and review some of these things, this is a nice just comparison for each of the schedules that we're looking at. I guess I didn't mention this, but it's important for you all to know, and maybe you want to say something about this. I believe the one commitment that we have made and are going to stick with for next year is that lunch will be reduced to half an hour or so. You want to talk about that hill you want to die on?
Well, I think there's, you know, for the needs that we have, there is a lot of time wasted in lunch. And it's easy sometimes to say, well, why don't we just have the study hall? Or why don't we have them go to tutoring? But remember, there's got to be somebody to supervise that. There's got to be somebody to plan it. And there's got to be somebody to make sure it's effective. And again, that's another thing that we put on our staff. So it just isn't plausible right now. We're going to try and do some stuff like that second semester, but it's just a lot of time. And Mr. Blackwell has said this as well. I welcome anybody to come and observe a lunch. Usually after the first 10 minutes, there's a handful of kids who will probably come in here to study, and the rest of it is cell phones and catch-up smashing and running around. And, you know, for a school that has some instructional needs, it's a huge waste of time. So we have to change that. A couple of things just to follow up with, and you know, this has been an arduous process, and I want to thank Mr. Blackwell and the teachers that served on the committee because it was a lot of work. The whole conversation started with, who are we and what do we value about Riverwood? What's unique? What are some things we offer? And there's a lot that other schools don't. The timeline was we were really hoping to make a decision very soon. My boss, Karen Cox, has asked us before we make any decision to meet with a scheduling expert who we met with him before, who's an expert in developing high school schedules. That's supposed to happen on the 23rd, and then we hope to make a decision shortly after that. I think that, anything else before we open it up to questions? Or?
No, I mean, I do want you to see what other schools do, just so that you know what's happening around us. And these are only Fulton County schools. You could look up others if you wish. But schools down the left-hand column are running what I called on here the traditional schedule. So by and large, aside from Langston Hughes, those are North Fulton schools that are running the traditional schedule. And if it has the asterisk, then they also have some sort of intervention period. So they have a time built into their schedule during the day or a day a week, I'm noting it in parentheses, where students do some kind of remediation in a class where they need extra help. Schools in the center are running a schedule that we're running now. And you know, you understand that we are currently running a 7-period schedule. It's called 8 periods, but our kids have a whole period for lunch. So they take 7 classes. It's a 7-period schedule. So any of them in the center are running a schedule similar to ours, and both North Springs and Centennial are doing kind of the intervention period. And schools on the right have the A-Day, B-Day, the 8-period block. The only thing I would want you to know about Banneker and Tri-Cities, one of the reasons why they're making it work, and we couldn't as easily make it work for our teachers anyway, is both of those schools are Title I. And with Title I comes additional funding, and so what they're doing with at least some of their additional funding is purchasing about 8 more teachers, which is it's what it would cost us to give our teachers planning every day and the ability to teach 6 out of the 8, which would be palatable. So I want you to know that. Dr. Shaw already talked about this, but I ended with where we started. So we did a survey, which is already closed, and some of you may have already taken it. I don't know if you want me to review the results later, or you can talk about them. You already looked at them.
Yeah. Oh, now? So, when you look at the results, it is, and I think, Mr. Blackwell, maybe we can print those and put them in Dropbox or something for the members.
Yeah.
It's pretty easy to pull off, and I'd like the Governor's Council to see them, at some point, certainly the committee and the staff. But basically, the sense that I got from the parents and students is that they are, and not just in the survey, but in comments and conversation, is that they're very concerned about keeping the opportunities that they put their kids here for. And when you look at the survey results, which he's pulling up now, I think it's very clear that the community, the students, the parents are, if these are the options, they're very interested in basically keeping our current schedule. Obviously, that's not popular with the staff, hence the rub. But I also, parents have told me, and I totally sympathize with this, that we have kids who are riding an hour from College Park because they want what we offer. They want the rigor of the IB program. They like the idea of the international studies, and they like our incredible fine arts programs. That's kind of the sense that I got. You just want to show that one little chart, Mr. Blackwell? Is that what you're on?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So visually, what I asked people to do, you can see down here at the bottom better, but I asked people to rank each of the 4 schedules in order of preference, 1 to 4. So it's a lot of graphs to look at for each one. It's easier maybe to look at this down here and see that the one that got the highest, I guess, is this 7 period, which is a combination of that number 1 and then all of these others that are close behind. But if you just look at the green alone, you can see that the number 1 is there, but then that number 1 is slightly better than that one, so that's a strong second. This really got the lowest number 1 response. So that's 3rd and that's 4th. I don't really think people knew what to do with trimester because it is confusing. But to really get a strong number here, you would have to say, how many number 1s and number 2s, but it kind of visually gives you an idea anyway. That people are mostly in favor of an A-day, B-day schedule or some form of our current schedule, to Dr. Shaw's point, that when you read a lot of these comments up here, especially these about the 6-period day, a lot of them are just about choices and what would happen to the IB classes and would I be able to graduate with the options that you would give me and things like that.
But then there are also comments in there from staff who say, this schedule's killing us, I can't do it, I'm leaving, and that's a concern because if we're trying to develop a positive culture and develop continuity and develop professional learning communities, it's really hard to do that when you have a staff turnover of 10, 15 teachers every year, and we had more than that last year. So it's a conundrum, it's a problem, and our hope is that maybe when we meet with the guru, there's some things that we didn't find, and maybe we can, but at this point, with the 2 options that are present, that kind of seem to be out front, the 6-period day or the 7-period day, I'm just going to be honest, somebody's going to be unhappy. If we do the 7-period day, the staff is going to be not happy to the point that we're probably going to have more turnover. If we do the 6-period day, the students are not going to be happy to the point that, maybe some of them had planned a track to get to graduation with their IB diploma, and then we're kind of pulling the rug out from them halfway. So, and again, maybe there's something we haven't thought of, but lot of people have worked on this, and it really just boils down because of funding. There's just really a couple of options. So anything else, maybe we can open it up for discussion, Mr. Blackwell?
No, nothing from me.
And just looking at the pros and cons, does it look like the what is it, trimester? It seems like that makes both happy.
It does. The problem with the trimester is nobody in Fulton does it. And we really don't know, as a public school, could we find any public schools that do it? Some private schools that do it?
Yeah, it's popular. It's more popular in the Northeast.
No, I'm in Georgia. I'm sorry.
Oh, not.
Marist is on a trimester.
Right, private schools are doing it. But there's so many concerns with that that people brought up actually in the comments as well. What does this look like for planning my four-year program? You know, what does it look like for our student information systems? What does it look like for kids who transfer in and out? What does it look like for Georgia high school academic eligibility? There's just, I'm not saying it couldn't be done, but I think, Portia, what also maybe dissuaded some people is there's no way we could have this ready for next year. Just some of the questions we thought of and probably the multitude we have. The trimester is kind of the best of both worlds, but there's a real question about can it work? A real logistics question.
So what we were told was, if we wanted to try to go with it, that no matter what, we needed to have a very strong option B, because we might go 3/4 of the way down the road and find out that we can't do that in our student information system or something like that.
So if we decided, yeah, let's do trimester, it's a little bit of a roll of the dice. So I think that concerns people too.
I have a question about the funding, which seems to be a challenge for funding an ideal program. And I know we get extra funding for IB, right? We're an IB school, don't we get funding for the IB program?
Short answer is yes.
Yes.
And since we're the only one in Fulton County, and since that is a big piece of the choice, in addition to arts and other stuff, not necessarily IB, is there a solution around that for the funding to be able to get more teachers and therefore give the teachers more planning time, which is their big,
Right.
opposition to the rest of the plans?
We have asked. What we've been told is let's go through the process with the scheduling guru first. To do what we want to do, if you just do the math in your head briefly, the way we are charged for extra teachers is the average salary, which is $75,000. Now, don't get upset, that includes benefits and everything else. So, because everybody says, well, I don't make $75,000 now. But that includes benefits and includes all the costs that go with hiring an employee. We need at a minimum 8 to 10. Maybe we could get by with 6. So then you do the math times 75, very quickly you're into the very high 6 figures to make it work. And what we've been told from the district is kind of a soft no. Look, talk to the guru, see what else you guys can do. Let this gentleman who's an expert go through our schedule and fine tooth comb, and then maybe we can open the discussion again.
Well, I think we should note that historically, the reason we were a magnet program was, I believe, an AB block.
Correct. That's what I was told.
And the magnet funding was cut. And that, there's a lot of sort of philosophical, programmatic reasons that wrapped around the change, but the main reason for the change was that it could no longer be afforded after the magnet program was cut. And so it does seem that, there is some precedence to go back and say, if you want us to be able to have a quality program that works for students and teachers, when you designed this, you gave us the funding to do it on a wrong schedule.
Right.
And now we can't anymore, and we're having these issues, so can that be reconsidered? And Dr. Shaw, I would think, once you talk to the guru and kind of see where we come out, if that is something that, is a preferred choice, perhaps the governance council could weigh in on that matter. But other questions of Mr. Blackwell or comments about the options?
I have a lot of faith in the county and coming up with the money that we need. So I'm a little bit surprised they even said, yeah, take a look at it and see what people say for the block. And, the 5-period trimester, even though, we don't have a finite number on how much that would cost. I'm thinking it's gonna cost the county a lot of money to go back and redo their computers and
Right.
more staffing and so
Right.
forth. So, I'm skeptical about those two just because of the funds that, I think in the end, when you say have a plan B, I think Fulton County's gonna say, you know what, we just don't have the money this year. So I don't know if I would, as much as a block schedule sounds very enticing, I don't know if it's necessarily worth the effort in pursuing that.
Well, and in closing, I do want to kind of reiterate why we even opened this can of worms. Because, while the kids are the most important people in the building, they can't do anything without the adults that are here. And what I heard consistently as I met with many people this summer, from the staff, from the community, and from some students, is that the schedule was a concern. The fact that, Portia's teaching 6 out of 7 when her colleagues, and you're a little different, your department here, but her colleagues at those schools on the left, the Centennials and not Centennial, but the Johns Creek and the Cambridges, are making the same salary but teaching one less section. That it's hard for them to provide effective, meaningful feedback to kids when you've got another 30 essays to grade on a Sunday afternoon. And those are all real tangible things, and they're things that impact what we can do for our kids because we're only as good as the people in the classroom and the support we give them. So that's why we opened this can of worms. My hope was, naively, that an answer would just kind of come to the front and we all agree, I should know better. It's just not that simple, and that's kind of where we are. We have to make a decision soon because transition activities, registration, scheduling, we're getting ready to start that. And I know Ms. Page over there is very interested because that's kind of her baby. So, we got to make a decision soon, and it's going to be difficult. But I appreciate your point, I really do.
I have, go ahead, Karen.
When the students voted, did they know that, I could possibly lose my favorite teacher next year or the year after?
Well, I don't want to use the word voted because we didn't do that. But what we did,
Well, surveyed.
What we did is we brought. Obviously, we can't talk to all the kids, but we brought in all the student body officers and the club presidents, which gave us a pretty good cross-section of the students. And I will tell you, and Mr. Blackwell will agree with this, that it was very insightful, very profound. They picked up on a lot of these issues quick from the teacher's perspective. A lot of them said, but my teachers will tell me that they've got too much work. My teachers will tell me that they have a long day. And they understood also that if we went to that 5-period day, that it would mean that we'd have to change how our staff looks and where our teachers are. So they got, I was incredibly impressed. They all got that. Would you guys agree? They got it all figured out. Lots of questions.
Yeah.
Right. Lots of great questions. The other thing that impressed me is they took the survey right there on their phones. Phones were just flying. That's pretty awesome. So it was a great meeting, and it presented us with some things we hadn't thought about as well. For example, Mr. Blackwell, I don't know if you mentioned this, but we had toyed with the idea of a 0 period. The problem is that let's say on a 6-period day you do a 0 period. Well then, what about transportation? Some of the kids were talking about those students who come from the south part of the county. If we're going to have a class at 7:15, it takes them out because there's no way, even if they have their own transportation, that they're leaving now so early. So they brought up a lot of great insight, and they jumped on that survey real quick and had some really good information. So I was impressed.
I have a question about what happens to the 7 period when you go to a 30-minute lunch.
Well, that's the part that we have to figure out. It's doable. Ms. Jones, what it would probably look like is you have your 7th period. Let's say, for example, you have your class period, then you go to lunch, then come back, and maybe you have a 30-minute study. Or maybe you have a stretched lunch period, or not lunch period, a stretched class period for that one period. There's a lot of things we can do in that to
But that doesn't change the challenge for the faculty.
It does not, no, ma'am, it does not. Yeah, that's a great question, it does not.
And then my other question was on the 6-period day with Mr. Blackwell, what you said about adding block in potentially, if we do a hybrid schedule, which is what you're talking about. If you can take one of these and add some block schedules into it, does that add more choices?
No.
Or it doesn't change anything relative to the choice?
Because it basically takes what we have, just kind of stretches it out.
The only benefit to, one of the primary benefits to doing something like that would be if the chief complaint of the students or teachers was that, we just 49 minutes, we can never you know, unpack, or we can never get anything done. The labs just don't happen because it takes, you know, more than 49 minutes. We could talk about doing a block a couple days a week so that we would know at least on Wednesday and Thursday, classes are about 90 minutes and people could do longer discussions or more labs. So, but it's not to offer more or less, you know, instructional, like, course choices. It would just be to make each individual class be able to do some different things. Does that make sense?
So like Ms. Young shared with me sometimes with some of our labs, and you guys can speak to this, it may say, let the solution sit for 40 minutes. Well, you can't do that, so they end up letting it sit overnight. So maybe the lab isn't as genuine as it should be. So maybe if you took a Tuesday, you did first, third, and fifth, and then Wednesday you did second, sixth, and eighth, or whatever it would look like, then at least you have some time during the week where you have a longer period of time that you can do some of these activities. Or maybe a foreign language lab takes longer or something like that.
Could that work in a 7 period?
It could. It could. Of course, the issue, like we brought up then, is you don't have an even number, so we'd have to really play with it a lot and figure out what it looks like. It's not impossible, but it's difficult.
And then, one last question. What is the teacher's perspective of these less choices? I'm assuming when you seriously consider a 6-period day, you've kind of seriously looked at what less choices are gonna be. And I'd like to know, you know, how that affects the IB program and what, you know, the people that are involved in that think, and
Sure.
the arts program. I mean, I've got to believe that the faculty's not crazy about being able, I mean, yes, they want more time, but now they're gonna be offering a lot less classes and a lot less students have access to that and things like that. So I'd be curious about what the faculty.
I'm going to give you my perception, and then we have some of our faculty here, and they can address it. This is what kind of information I've collected anecdotally and through the survey. I think our staff would rather have, collectively, not individually, I think they'd rather have quality over quantity. I think that, you know, some of our outstanding teachers, and many of them are, would, even though it's gonna mean that IB looks different, maybe you just have 2 tracks, I think a lot of them would say that at least we can do that better and give the kids more feedback and provide them more opportunities and be more timely in returning things to them, if it means limiting some of their choices. But that's my perception. If you guys disagree with me, please do. But these are the experts right here.
No, I agree with you completely. It's quality. When we have, it was AB or a period day, you kind of, counselors can speak to this, trying to find another class for a kid, find an 8th class, find a 7th class. And so there are students in classes who don't want to be in those classes. I can think of some students in 3 honors, they're kind of just going in there through regular. They're taking the world language requirement, but they need something else to fit in that slot. So if that means there are less students, maybe a section or 2 less, I'm okay with that. And if it means you have to just consider maybe just doing French, Spanish, and Japanese language for IB as opposed to doing the Chinese language and building that up for IB, okay. If you see most of us during our lunchtime, we're using it as a plan. I no longer have the amount of time I had before when I taught the same classes. So my lunch most of the time is eaten on the run. Yesterday I had 3 students making up a listening activity and 1 making up 2 quizzes, and that was during their lunch. And that's typical. And then after they left, I would make some copies, I created something, I put it on the computer, and then I had to go lunch with my grade group.
Do you want to take it?
I mean, I feel the same way. It's just, I don't teach any IB courses, but, you know, just seeing my teachers and having to run all around the building because many of them float and not having enough time to get things done, you know, it just brings about a lot of stress and anxiety at home, you know, and I hear that, you know, that they can't sleep or, you know, because they can't get this done or that done. It's just a lot.
And we added a lot of courses, especially in social studies, and we're excited about it. We're like, oh, we can, since we have this extra slot, we can add African studies, maybe international events, and that was great, but it's taking its toll, because we don't have the same planning time to get it together. And I have a lot of other things I want to do as far as projects and we haven't done it. So we're trying to do it with email and meeting, but and we don't have to do something extra, but I know I have a few more minutes. I can make that.
Would the teacher, would the faculty prefer the AB if money was no object?
Absolutely.
If we could get planning every day, you know, that would give them every day 90 minutes of planning plus their 25-minute lunch. And I think, you know, and now there's a lot of art, the block is not the panacea. Let me say this too, at the end of the day, the bell schedule doesn't matter. What matters is the quality of the teacher in that classroom. But it does impact morale, it does impact time, it does impact course offerings, it does impact what kids can take. All that to say, from what I've heard from the staff, I'm gonna say this, Opie. Somebody anonymously put a book in Opie's mailbox about how to do block scheduling. So somebody's sending a signal. So I think that may be a sign that you know, it's not a panacea, and Jeremy has done a lot of research on some of the negative parts of the block. But it would allow the teachers a little easier day, more time to plan, and still allow the kids to take the courses they need. The last part of that, and I don't want to talk this to death, and I apologize, is if we found the funds to do a block, kind of midstream, our professional development would change. Right now, we're focused a lot on lesson planning and developing our PLCs and making sure that we have good planners. What would happen is now we'd have to kind of re-educate teachers about what it means to teach in a 90-minute versus a 45. Because, you know, you need to be able to do very smooth transitions. You can't do one activity for 90 minutes. So, and we could do that, but that would be something we have to be cognizant of as well.
So I'm a little perplexed now about our next steps, because I thought we were heading toward a recommendation like this week that we had to bring forward, but now you've been asked to take this additional step. So my question, I guess, is do we have March or February, excuse me, to have another, since we're meeting the first week of February, to have another conversation about this? Or are you gonna have to lock something in before we meet again?
Well, I know she's over there freaking out. The 20th, well, he is too. The 23rd.
Just a question.
The 23rd is the meeting with the guy, and hopefully,
Does he have a name?
I don't, what is his name?
I can't remember.
Sorry, if you're watching on video, sorry, I don't remember your name. Yes, but I think one of the things, we have to know by the first week of February, at the very latest, and that's later than I want it to be. And we're already meeting on, what did we say, the 6th or 7th?
We're doing course entry on the 10th.
Yeah,
That's happening.
that's gotta happen.
Yeah.
So and maybe by then we'll be able to have gone through the information provided by this gentleman, and we can at least know yes or no if there's any additional.
Yeah.
So one thing I would just ask, if we do stay with the current schedule, and I don't even know what I have in mind, but we do have flexibility with the funding that we do have through the charter system, and we're about to enter into the budget process, where we can, you know, really take a creative look at the budget that we do have. So I'm just wondering if some part of that could be some conversation with the teachers about, are there other things that could be offloaded off of your responsibilities? And again, like I was saying, I don't even know what those might be. You know, maybe we could allocate funds for some supplemental resources that would make the teacher's responsibilities more focused on that classroom instruction and make it somewhat less onerous. That's the only, you know, option I can think of but I'd at least like to have a conversation about that. If you have this schedule, what else could be relieved or modified to give you more time? And then maybe we could have conversations about, could we find ways to reallocate the funds if necessary to support those types of activities? Because I hate to just ignore the fact that the teachers do have, and I think then the bottom line, it's basically they have 30 more students approximately to support than the other school, not than all other schools, but then the schools on the sort of left column. And so therefore, are there things that we could fund that would take non-teaching duties off of them and maybe give them more focused time to do that?
Certainly something we can look at. And the other thing is, you know, by the time the first week of February rolls around, I'll have my first preliminary look at next year's budget, so I'll be able to really answer that a little better.
So back to my question, is this in February, basically you're going to tell us what you've decided?
I think we have to know by then. Right? We have to know by then. Correct, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And in the meantime, you know, even though the survey is technically closed, please, you know, people in the community, people you know, have some input, ideas, email, phone calls, I certainly welcome it.
Okay, so, there is no action on this item though.
They're not today, no, there
Okay.
shouldn't be.
All right, so our next topic then are the approval of the request for flexibility, which we've already discussed at length, but this was our time when we have to send those forward. So I'll turn it over to Claire, tell us what we need to do here.
Okay, so, as of last month, we had 3 RFFs on the table on which to vote. And when I spoke with our Fulton County rep last night, I believe, did she end up speaking with you, Dr. Shaw, about the third item, the international service learning activities?
She sent us an email that, Crystal, you're talking about Crystal, maybe?
Yes.
Yeah, she was gonna try and be here this morning. Oh,
Right.
she just got an email. I'm coming. Traffic is crazy, but I'm almost there. Okay, so she's on her way. But she did, and, do you want, you can just talk about
Okay,
that?
so it's my understanding that she and/or Dr. Shaw talked with Ms. Cox, and Ms. Cox said, this doesn't even need to be a waiver.
Correct.
You know, this is something that you can absolutely do without the waiver. So we don't need to vote on the item, but, but know that it, it has been approved by Ms. Cox and for whatever approval we need. So that item we do not need to vote on.
Which one did you say?
Item number 3, the waiver requesting flexibility for international service learning activities.
And just, I hate to read to people, but just from Crystal's email, Karen will be willing to work with Riverwood under the current policy to grant the flexibilities highlighted above. So I think their belief is that we kind of have flexibility within that we don't need a waiver.
Okay, so then we just need to vote on 1 and 2. I don't know if everybody has it in front of them, but number 1 was the waiver requesting the ability to have an English teacher instruct a reading course without reading certification. And my memory serves me, last month, everybody seemed to be favorable on that, so I guess we need to make a motion to vote unless there's any other discussion on that one.
You want to vote on them separately?
Or we could do them together, would that be easier? That'd be easier for, okay. The second one is, well, does anybody have any discussion? Move on to number 2 now, okay? Number 2, the waiver requesting exemption for IB diploma candidates from the physical science graduation requirement. Does anybody need to discuss any of that before we vote?
The only thing I will comment on is that, just to clarify, that it does give them the ability to take higher level IB courses, which would be equivalent from a college admission standpoint or greater than physics, because it is excluding physical science and physics, but they're taking something that is more rigorous and bears college credit. So I just think we need to make that.
And if the child wants to take that class, he or she can still take it.
Right.
It's just it's an option.
Any other discussion on those? Can we get a motion for approval?
I move to put those RFFs forward to the county for approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Claire, any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you very much for managing that process, and for all the surveys and the input and the.
So we vote today, and those go to Ms. Cox no later than Friday, and then she presents them to Dr. Avosa, who will approve them by January 31st.
Thank you so much. All right, our next item is a little bit of a unique opportunity. I don't know of any other time this has occurred. And Dr. Kopkis and Dr. Shaw have done some research about it, so Dr. Kopkis isn't here, so I'll just ask you to explain the situation.
Sure. Well, I'm a little hesitant. We have had a unique situation with an individual student. Now, you know we're not going to discuss individual students, so I don't want to entertain any questions about this particular student, but the circumstance is this. This student is moving to us from somewhere in the great north, Minnesota, Wisconsin, somewhere. And she's currently in an IB program. But and the issue is, even though she's not going to be moving into our attendance zone, obviously this student wants to continue the IB program.
What year is she?
She's going to be a junior. No, she's currently a junior. She's currently a junior, so she's already in the program. Thank you. And that's really all I want to say about her. But we do need to kind of think about, and this is unique, I mean, it hasn't happened that I've seen in the last semester. But keep in mind, we're talking about kind of making an exception to the criteria that was put in place last year for this year. So we're not talking about process A and B for next year. We're talking about that the 30 were allowed. I believe the number was at 28 when it closed, correct, Mr. Blackwell? So here's one more who's shown up and said, hey, I'm already in a program. Now, this particular student doesn't finish her semester until this week. So it's not like, she's hanging out at home waiting for a decision. But what I went to the district about it, and what Ms. Cox said is that whatever the governance council wishes to do, she will support. So if this body decides that, in this circumstance, we can allow this entry criteria, then we can go ahead and allow that to happen in the district and be fine with it. Of course, what we're saying is that we're kind of adding a criteria to what was decided last year. Again, I don't think we're going to have 15 people show up tomorrow out of state who are already enrolled in the IB program. But the reason that Dr. Cockness and I wanted to bring this to your attention is because if we're about what's best for kids, and we know that we were going to accept 30, we only took 28, I think it's worth considering an exception for a student that's already in the program, and from what I understand, has experienced, again, trying not to talk about an individual student, but has experienced success in the program and wants to continue. So that is the issue at play.
So the student is in Fulton County, just outside of.
Yeah, the student will be moving into Fulton County, but thank you, Portia, I'm sorry if I didn't clarify this. We'll be moving into Fulton County from wherever, but not in the Riverwood Academy.
Okay.
Thoughts?
And then we had 28 students fill the spot, that there were 30 that were.
The governance council had selected 30. By the time the deadline closed and applications, I believe that.
The county told us we could accept 30.
Yes,
I
I'm
think
sorry,
that
the county
we
said
did not
30, sorry.
set 30.
The
The county
bigger
said 30
issue
was
is it doesn't fall into the criteria of the 30 either. That's the biggest issue.
That is the
We have
biggest
to
issue.
decide.
And I think, to Dr. Shaw's point, I think what we really, we could either treat it as an individual case, that we're gonna grant permission for this individual case, or we could discuss it as, do we want to basically set a policy or a criteria that if a student moves into Fulton County who has already partially completed requirements for an IB diploma, because they're not a rising freshman either, they're a junior, that we would allow them, if we had space in our remaining numbers, to enroll. And that's really what we're talking about.
That's really what we're
And
talking
this is the first time I know, I mean, there may have been other times, but
Is she coming this semester?
She will be coming once she finishes her current semester.
So we're already under, she's coming for this year, and we're already under the 30 for this year. So it doesn't, so she's under the 30, so we can let her in without any going over the 30 or.
she doesn't meet the criteria we established.
Okay.
She's not a sibling, she's not at Ridgeview, she's not an employee's child, she would be like a new family, and we would allow for new families. So to me, that's the exception, is that, we would consider, people sort of outside that criteria in this one unique circumstance, that they've already partially completed the program and need to complete it.
So then that's gonna probably seem unfair to like the other students who wanted to maybe apply for the program, like, but were not in that criteria? Is that unfair or something?
Maybe the way to look at it is what we've established for next year, because that considers IB as part of it, even though this year we don't have that in the criteria. Because this person potentially could get in next year, depending on the numbers, through an
No,
IB.
she's not a rising ninth grader. The criteria we
Oh,
established
IB.
was solely for
Okay.
rising.
I thought we had a provision in there for transfers.
No, we've never talked, and that's, I think, again, the wrinkle here, is we've never talked about what if somebody moves into the county, they're not a rising ninth grader, because magnet enrollment is only for rising ninth graders. So what if somebody moves in as a junior or a senior and wants to complete an IB diploma? We haven't really entertained that potential. So anyway, I was gonna give you all a
I was
chance.
just gonna think, having known that she would be in the new grade, it would have moved closer to Riverwood. I think, you know, she's obviously worked hard to get to this point. I just give her the chance to go to the diploma.
And yeah, I think if an Ivy diploma is something so unique, and especially in this area, that if she wants to continue pursuing it, then I think by all means, let the girl do so.
Is she a diploma candidate, or she's just taking certificates in?
My understanding is she's a diploma candidate, and Dr. Coppins had to go to a meeting, but do you remember Mr. Blackwell? She was a DP kid.
Right.
So were other kids turned away? I mean, I'm just trying to make sure I have a clear understanding. Were other kids turned away at the beginning of last year because they lived outside of the attendance zone?
No one was turned away,
Okay.
but if you were not a sibling or already at Ridgeview or the child of an employee, you were not allowed to
Not even
apply.
considered.
As a ninth grader.
Okay.
So they haven't even
Okay.
started the IB program. I think
Okay.
what's making this one challenging, she's
Is because she's
invested.
already in
She's
the program.
invested, and she's gonna have to stop, because
Well,
Fulton County doesn't.
yeah, I don't see
I
the
think it's
problem
different.
with
I think
this.
it's
Just
very
thinking
unique
about what it would
situation.
look like. I don't have any problem with it. I think it would, I think it would be fine. I'm just trying to think about what members in the community say, why didn't my child get an opportunity?
I had that concern as well, because there were people, obviously, as we talked about this year, who aren't a sibling, aren't at Ridgeview, do live in the county, wanted the opportunity to come here as ninth graders, and last year there was no window for them, no way for them to do that. And so what we were basically saying is that we are allowing people who are outside those criteria, but only in the event that they move into the district. They really have to be a junior or senior to be an IB diploma candidate. So they're moving into the district already as an IB diploma candidate and wish to finish their program.
And we are the only one that offers that in Fulton County.
It's the only
right
one.
now.
It's a very good
So as long as we, almost,
So do we have to add that clause to the criteria that needs to meet?
Talking about for next year, Ms. Gonzalez? Well, I think that is we're talking, well, short answer is that's a governance council decision. We're talking about kind of two separate things. In this case, we're talking about really modifying what we're still operating on last year. We can go back and revisit it, but understand the application's already out there with the criteria that was approved, which I'm going to address in just a second. The short answer is yes, we can do it. We can add it, if that's what we want.
But I want to clarify, I don't think we're changing what we voted on, which is how you enroll in the magnet program as a ninth grader. We're not talking about that at
The
all.
ninth grader key.
So that stands. I do think if the council wanted to sort of set this as a policy, it would be somewhere separate on the website, that would say,
transfer students.
if you are a transfer student into the county who's already completed requirements toward an IB diploma. Because I think that's key. You don't want somebody moving in and saying, well, I always wanted to do the IB diploma. We're talking about students who've already completed requirements toward the IB diploma, allowing them to finish it. So, like I said at the beginning, what do you think?
I'm just thinking that the parents should have thought a little bit more ahead. You know, if their child has the initiative to be an IB diploma student, then they need to be looking for an IB school. And they need, and that's what they need.
Yeah, but do we punish the kid for the parent's choice of word?
No, Marcia was just asking what I was thinking, and so, you know.
Ask a question.
Yeah, I agree
So,
fully with
yeah,
that.
I'm-
Parents should
I'm-
have moved into the Riverwood attendance.
I think they should have done more research, because that's the most important.
But there may be other reasons they
$30,000 and
couldn't.
send them to the international school. So, but, yeah, so they didn't. And so again, I think, that's, we don't want to, but I presume they're going to have to provide transportation because they're not, that would be a question for the district, but I couldn't see you sending a bus up to wherever this child is to get them. I think it's they've got to get the child here, or the child has to get themselves here.
Do we need to make a motion and vote on something?
Yeah, so my question is, in order to do this, do we want to make a decision on this one case, which is fine, right? Or do we want to set this as a policy? If we make a decision on this one case, then we can always consider another case.
you know, she's coming soon, let's make this one case, and then if somebody would like to present as a policy later.
Okay, so,
I would prefer policy just so people know what to expect than dealing with these on an ongoing, one case here and one case there. I mean, if we really believe that having IB students that are already in the diploma is the right thing to do, then we should make a policy. If we don't think it's the right thing to do, that's it.
So maybe,
But for this one, I think you're right, Claire. We can make a choice on this one and then decide if we want to revisit a policy proposal later.
okay.
I agree.
Okay, so today we're voting on this one situation.
Right.
All right, so let me try to word this and see if we have a motion. So, unless you want to do it. Try to word it.
No. I'll defer to your expertise.
All right, so we're voting to approve enrollment of a student who is moving from out of state into Fulton County and has already completed coursework toward an IB diploma and is a diploma candidate
But lives out of zone.
and lives out of the attendance zone. Second, all that important.
Voting to approve enrollment of a student who is moving from out of state into Fulton County, has completed coursework towards an IB diploma
And is then diploma candidate,
and is a diploma candidate.
but is out of the Riverwood attendance zone. Does that capture it?
I think we
So we're just making a decision on this one situation. All right, can we have a motion for that, to approve that?
I move we approve the candidate on the IB attendance zone for the intersection of the for the IB.
Dr. Square makes the motion. Is there a second? Michelle seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, done.
Good.
Our next topic, which will probably be short,
It should be.
is the update on enrollment in the magnet criteria program. Anyway,
Okay.
you know what I'm talking about. Out-of-zone enrollment criteria for the magnet program.
Magnet application went up Friday because we wanted to get that done because we said it was going to be 10, so that's what we did. When the work that we had done, and when we sent that to the district, there was two things that came back to us that the district required that we change. One is, and there was an email that went out to the staff yesterday explaining this, that under the new system, the local school governance council, us, no longer has the discretion about employees. All employees must go through the employee hardship process, which is currently on the website and has a deadline of February 17th. So those criteria, which we had talked about with the feeder program, feeder schools having their kids here and should, all that was taken off. And if you're wondering why, that's why. The other thing we were asked to do is to take the numbers off. So when you see that, it doesn't mean the numbers aren't there, they are. But as far as what we were asked to publish, when we talked about 35 and 15, you will not see those numbers on the application. That's really the only difference. And I did talk to Ms. Greenway before it went up and felt it would, because we were under a deadline and I didn't want to tell our community one thing and do another. So we did get it up on the 10th with those modifications. But when you look at it and you say, hey, wait a minute, this isn't exactly, I wanted to explain kind of what happened in the meantime. And that's what the district instructed us to do with that. So it's kind of just a discussion, information item. Are there any questions or anything?
Everybody's clear that, the employees, now we're being told the employees go through the employee hardship process. That's not really in our decision-making process. They all go over there, and so we have the other categories that we would be considering. And I do think that in the past, the numbers weren't on the application either, so.
Okay, I didn't know that.
I mean, I think last year they were, but I think in the past before that, there was a lottery, but it was never like what that number was gonna be, so that's a little depressing, I guess.
The only question I have about any of that is, the right hand knowing what the left hand's doing. If we've got a process and we're accepting certain applications under this criteria and they're dealing with the hardships, is the county managing the total number?
The hardships, my expectation is, and will you please clarify that?
Yes, okay.
Is that the hardships do not count in our numbers.
So the hardships would be on top of our numbers, which
Yes.
then becomes an issue of whether we're okay with more than 50 students.
But I'll just
Right?
add this, the
Right.
hardship decision is made with an eye to the
Capacity.
capacity of
Okay.
it.
So they're probably not going to allow us to get over the 50 that we wanted to manage to.
There's still a level of manageability that we have to
Okay.
have. And the other thing is that our applications are due in 17, the hardship applications are due to the district in 17. So there should be some communication because all that information will be done by that same day.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I think what this allows, which is, if we get up to 50 with our numbers, and there is an employee who really wants to bring their child, there's still an avenue for them to do that. Because we made them first choice anyway, so.
Right.
I think it's actually quite cleaner. And I was surprised when I asked the question in the first place and was told that they should do both. I was actually surprised that that's the answer we got, so now that's no longer the answer. Okay, any other comments about that? So the next topic is a update on the capacity committee. Bruce Pitney is not here. Dr. Shaw said he has no information at this point on the scheduling of those charrettes. So we're gonna take some action between now and the next meeting to see if we can't get more specifics on what's happening, because we were told that that will be fairly imminent. Unless you have anything else to add.
Ma'am, I do not have enough.
Okay, so at this point, we are at public comment, am I right? Okay, is there anybody on the list for public comment?
I just wanted to talk about what y'all are going through this morning. I think the issue is last year y'all established an attendance policy. It was very hard to establish. You established it. The criteria was there. It was done in May after much controversy. I think by not following that criteria, you're not being fair to all families in the community. I also think that things are coming up on the governance that are not being socialized, or even people in the community are even aware that are being discussed. And whether it's one child or 20, I just think that it's a very, very difficult situation. And again, not saying right or wrong, but I think it's a slippery slope that y'all are going against policies that y'all have already established and you've already accepted families under. And I think, I think we're all in favor of the IB, but I think at the same time, I think it's going to be really something that really, if y'all have things like this in the future, they really need to be socialized to the community. And I really think that y'all need to stick with the policies that y'all have already voted on and when all members are here. Because as y'all can see around, we're missing quite a few governance, members this morning. Anyway, thank you.
So since we have a few minutes, do we want to is there anything else we want to add to make sure we talk about in February? We've got the capacity committee, we've got the schedule, which will really just be a discussion item, so she'll tell us what we've decided.
Is there any budget stuff that has to be done in February?
No, ma'am. The budget information is just coming to us in January, and then there's a process the district has where we work through it. But in that window, and I'm trying to do it from memory, Ms. Greenway knows better than I do. I think it's in March is when I officially present it to the governance council, so it will be done.
And then the role of the finance committee, supposed finance committee,
Yeah, we're supposed
governance
to have a
council.
finance committee that's supposed to get input on the budget.
Yeah. And I don't know whether under the, I don't know whether that's functions changed
Could
or
you
not.
please check on that? I'm going to put that on the budget process on the agenda for February.
We can talk about it, that's what we'll do. Because I just went to a training last week that kind of went through how the process has changed through the governance councils. Talk to our resident expert, Ms. Crystal.
All right, so we'll put that on the agenda for February. I will just say, as part of the conversion charter, the time I've been on the council, I've been disappointed about the amount of influence the council has had on the budget.
Okay.
I've really felt like the administration brought a budget after everything was decided, and then the council was asked to vote on it, which is not my understanding of the way that's supposed to work. So, if we could talk about that in February, that would be
Sure.
great. And I know Kendra Henson has asked to talk about the MIP evaluation process, so we should have time for that.
seed fund
schedule.
money. We have to have seed fund money on there.
So we moved it, seed fund, we'll put that first. And that's action, we have to vote on that?
Mhm.
Okay. The budget process and then the NYP evaluation process. All right, well, as usual, I'll send out a draft agenda, and if anybody thinks of anything in the interim, you can always add it. All right, with no further business, we are adjourned.